Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we will travel to a lighthouse. You know that friendly glow your phone makes when you crack it on in a dark hallway? The way even a small light tells your feet where the floor is and your hands where the doorframe ends. Take that feeling and stretch it over a coastline. Not a spotlight, not drama. Just a steady yes in a world of maybe. That's where lighthouse keeping begins. Not as a tower, not as a romance, but as a repeated promise in the night. If this cozy story helps you drift off, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a gentle comment. Your support keeps the journey continues. At first, the house in Lighthouse is wishful thinking. It's a place to hold flame high enough for sailors to see it beyond the shoulder of the next cliff. The earliest keepers are simply watchers, shepherds of glow. They stack brush and driftwood within a circle of rocks, or suspend a basket of embers from a timber frame like a cooking pot for the horizon. Smoke takes the hint and writes a column into the sky. Below, water moves the way a great animal breathes, slow and certain, and the fire says, "Here." The supplies are a messy treasure. Pine knots with resinous hearts, peat cut in bricks, coils of pitchy rope, a bundle of rushes dipped in oil to retell the spark if the wind talks it into a sulk. Cloaks smell of tar and ash. Gloves remember every splinter that has ever introduced itself. Nothing about it is elegant yet, but patterns begin, and at sea a pattern is as valuable as a map. Trade thickens like soup left on a low simmer. Fishing boats want safer entries to their coves. Coasters and deep-water vessels want points of assurance along the long drift of night. So the bonfire becomes an institution. A village raises a sturdier frame. A city council or a guild hires someone to steward the blaze from dusk to dawn, with wages that depend on the light being visible, and no accidents whispered on the quay come morning. Sometimes there are light dues, coins gathered from ships that pass, a practical tithe paid in thanks for the reduction in calamity. A dependable glow turns wrecks from inevitabilities into exceptions, and exceptions are cheaper to insure. Commerce listens to the math of light. Height, predictability, and memory evolve together. Height first, fire perched higher looks farther, especially across a curved horizon. Poles become platforms. Platforms become squat towers. A simple hood appears above the brazier to scold careless sparks back into line. Metal enters the story. Iron gratings and chains, hooks and pulleys for hauling fuel, because shoulders grow tired and the heart of a fire eats more wood than anyone ever estimates. Keepers learn to build a windbreak, plank and sailcloth hinged, so a gust can be blunted without starving the blaze. When fog comes in, a rich grey blanket you can almost fold, the flame is a soaked whisper, but even that whisper reassures a helmsman measuring space by sound and faith. Predictability grows next. Someone posts hours on a board or in a harbour book. The fire will be lit at dusk and tended until dawn with extra attention in storm season. A logbook appears. Cloud low. Fire fed at the 3rd hour. One sail observed to the north keepers trim their nights into segments. Fuel laid by, fire mounded. Windbreak adjusted. Coal stirred. This is the subtle revolution. A job becomes a craft. The light is no longer the burden of whoever drew the short straw or lived closest to the cliff. It's a responsibility with tools, with know-how, with habits worth arguing about politely. There's a right way to stack wood for a long burn. There's a wrong way to close a shutter. These are opinions a person earns in salt and soot. Then comes memory. The shore learns what its night looks like and expects the same again tomorrow. Sailors recognise a headland not just by shape but by behaviour. That one always burns a little yellow. That one is quicker to start and slower to fade. That one has a smoky comma to the south because the wind there is a character with its own lines. Without mathematics or lenses yet, the coast picks up a kind of signature. Day marks, painted stones, striped towers, odd silhouettes, begin to speak by daylight too, because it's rude to make ships guess in the morning after you've helped them in the night. Step inside one of those early towers, and you notice the smell before the view. Tar, charred wood, wet rope, stone that has swallowed 100 storms and kept them politely. The stair is narrow, hugging the curve of the wall. Your palm finds a groove in the rail worn by everyone who has climbed it with a load. Up top, the lantern space is more room than instrument. A grate for fuel, a simple hood, sometimes open air with heavy shutters on iron hinges. The windows, if there are windows at all, are thick and a little bubbled, like a pudding that's set while someone was laughing. Brass is scarce, paint comes and goes with civic budgets and weather. On a ledge sits a tin of oil and a rag that used to be a shirt and now is good for nothing but shining what must shine. This is not yet the world of precise light. This is the world that proves night can be argued with. Why does it matter? Because on water the horizon is a loop and rocks are strangers until they aren't. A coastline without signals is a bedtime story without commas. The light puts punctuation back, and with punctuation meaning returns. A ship knows where not to go by the steady glow that says where the land is. That's the basic kindness. But there's more. With each reliable beacon, routes become calculable. A captain can shave hours without shaving judgment. Fishermen promise home by midnight and keep the promise. Merchants plan arrivals like recipes. Even those earthly poets of probability, the insurers, quietly lower their eyebrows. A light is safety, yes, but it is also schedule. And schedule is a civilizing force in weather's republic. The work shapes the worker. The keeper, once just a person near a flame, becomes a specialist. In some places, families hold the post for generations. Children learn to count by the number of steps to the lantern room, and to read by the dance of shadows across a page. In other places, veterans of the sea take the shore job, their hands remembering rigging even while they grind damp ash from a grate. Either way, the keeper begins to think in weather. They are bilingual in wind. They can read foam, which is a dialect few appreciate until they must. They develop the tea of interruptions, strong enough to forgive being abandoned for half an hour, while someone runs upstairs to argue with a gust. The joke is always about the wind deserving overtime pay. The wind never laughs, but it does take the hint sometimes and behave long enough for a calm sip. Fuel teaches lessons in patience and possibility. Where forests crowd the coast, timber burns bright and quick and asks to be courted continually. Where peat is plentiful, bricks glow from within, steady as old dogs. Where coal comes by barge, the grate roars with a deeper note and sends a taller plume to be read at distance. Each fuel leaves a signature on the tower's bones, smoke that glosses stone, soot that prints itself in crescents on skin between glove and cuff. The keeper's clothes carry the memory of 100 fires. Even after washing, the coat smells faintly of last night's argument with a squall. Brass latches hold fingerprints like photographs. A clean fingertip shines for a second before the day resumes its charcoal compromise. Meanwhile, masonry learns patience. Early towers are built thick against tantrums, their stairwells snug in the wall where wind can't throw elbows. Windows shrink as the height grows, a stone way of remembering balance. Mortar, salted by proximity, cures harder than it looks. Builders leave putlog holes, little square mouths where scaffolding once perched, that swallows and sparrows later colonise as if continuing the work of watching. Furnishings are monastic, a pallet, a table, a peg for a coat that never quite dries, a chest for clean socks and a spare lantern. There is a shelf of tools that either gleam or sulk depending on the weather and the keeper's mood. Order is ideal, life is persuasive, the mug will end up where the hand leaves it, which is usually on a warm stone near the stair. Along the coast, a slow standardization spreads. Not a regimented sameness yet, but an agreement that lights should be where charts say they are and behave as charts expect. Hours of lighting become law in some ports. Fines happen for carelessness the way weedsmen happen in summer. Towers start to wear distinct coats of paint for daytime recognition. Bands, checks, bold colours that argue with fog even at noon. By night the differences are subtler but present. One burns steady, another flickers in a rhythm dictated by the way its keeper feeds it, an early hint of the character that later centuries will refine into clockwork signatures. The sea, which loves to forget people, begins to remember places. This is also the era when light becomes more than heat. Keepers and tinkerers try to coax the flame outward with reflective surfaces, polished metal bowls behind the fire, tin panels bent just so, small experiments done with the patience of someone who must make a long night interesting. Lantern housings tighten their seams. Drafts are managed rather than suffered. Smoke is ushered out like a guest who has stayed beyond good manners. The adjustments seem minor, but the effect is moral as much as optical. A light that appoints itself matters more and wastes less, and waste is a sore subject for anyone who has carried a basket of fuel up a damp stair in January. The social fabric shifts too. A keeper is no longer simply nearby, the role is earned. There are appointments, sometimes uniforms or badges, certainly expectations. The town knows the keeper's name and greets them on market day with a respect adjacent to reverence. Children play versions of the work in miniature. Lanterns of tin with pierced stars, candles shielded from wind by a parent's steadying hand. The tower becomes not just a building, but a neighbour. When storms come, cottage windows tilt toward it across the fields, the way you might glance at a clock tower when running late. The presence of that steady glow edits worry down to a manageable paragraph. We should be honest but gentle about the nights when the world presses too hard. There are times the wind insists on rearranging things, times the fog swallows sound so completely that even your own boots seem far away, times the flame sulks and must be coaxed back like a cat under a bed. The keeper learns a steady voice meant for inanimate objects. They keep a coat by the door and a spare pair of dry socks in a tin in case everything else gets wet. They develop the habit of laughter at odd hours, because laughter is a way to mark time when clocks go stubborn. And then the storm passes, as storms usually do, leaving a pale morning and a tower that looks as if nothing at all happened. The glamour is minimal, the relief is maximal. By now the difference between hillside fires and the lighthouse keeping is the difference between improvisation and ritual. The light is tended in order. Wood is stacked in a way that tells the future how it should behave. Fuel is tallied, repairs are noted, scheduled, completed. The tower's little economies mean fewer surprises for ships. A keeper's competence is a civic asset, like a bridge that doesn't sway. These are not spectacular. Spectacle belongs to disaster, but they are the quiet triumphs a coastline counts on. And commerce, always alert to the difference between what might happen and what probably will, reorganizes itself around the presence of certainty. Shipping lanes find courage, insurance finds manners, markets find regularity. Families find that the person at sea is more likely to be the person at the table next week. It is not that danger evaporates. No honesty offers that bargain. But that risk meets its first real bureaucrat on the headland. The light files the edges off the worst nights, and in doing so it changes how people imagine what is possible. Stand with the keeper toward dawn. The fire has settled into a bed of bright coals. The sky, that good negotiator, is folding grey into blue. The horizon sharpens its pencil. The wind, tired of being dramatic, tucks itself under the cliff. The keeper stirs the last embers and lets them relax, eyes the roof for leaks to nag later, notes in the book the simple facts of a night well managed. The cat, there is almost always a cat, a champion mouser and casual philosopher, makes a circuit of inspection and decides the stairs still pass. A boat ghosts by, oars lifting and dipping, like commas in a polite sentence, and a voice carries, "Good night up there." The keeper answers with a wave you could hear if light had hands. What has changed from the first bonfire to this early tower is not only the hardware, though the hardware matters, it's the intent. The light has moved from gesture to institution, from accident to expectation. It has become a habit of care made visible, a night-long conversation between shore and ship that both sides count on. And it began with the simplest act, holding up brightness and asking it to keep its word. When you switch on your phone in the dark tonight, to find the keyhole, to avoid the chair you always stub your toe on, you might notice your whole body relax by a degree or two at that little halo. That easing is ancient. Multiply it by waves and wind, by cargo and family names, and you have the first chapter of lighthouse keeping. The engineering will grow clever in later parts. Glass that bends light like a disciplined river, gears that teach beams to speak in steady syllables. But before all that, there is this. Stone and smoke, a watchful figure on a stair, and a glow that tells the sea, again and again, yes, here. You can hear the night in the tiny sounds, the tick of cooling metal, the soft clink of a lens pane, the wind just tapped, the distant hush of waves doing arithmetic with the rocks. Up the spiral the keeper goes, a steady rhythm of boot on iron, hand on rail, lamp in a protective circle of palm. This is the second chapter of lighthouse keeping, where light becomes craft. Fire is no longer simply persuaded to burn, it is trained, like a polite dog that knows when to sit and when to sing. The room at the top isn't just a hearth with a view, it is an instrument, and the person tending it is less a firefighter than a watchmaker with a mop. First, the flame itself learns manners. Instead of a stubborn heap of wood, the light comes from a lamp designed to feed it evenly, a reservoir, a wick, a chimney to steady the draft. In many places, the breakthrough is the argand lamp, a bright little engine with a circular wick and a glass chimney that turns a fluttering flame into a reliable column. Oil no longer sloshes in a pan, it rises with purpose. Plant oils fuel many coasts, colza, rapeseed, thick, patient, and far less like a barn on fire than earlier choices. Later, kerosene arrives with its livelier temperament, a flame that burns clear and long if you keep the wicks trimmed as neat as Sunday hair. Whalebone scrimshaw gives way to ledgers about barrels. The romance smells slightly of lamp-cleaning solvent and the steel whisper of a wick trimmer. Then the light stops being just light and discovers direction. Imagine a flame surrounded by mirrors, each one curved like the inside of a spoon and polished so you could redo your hair in it if you had time. Early reflectors cup the brightness and throw it seaward in a sheet. Useful but hungry for fuel and fussy to keep aligned. The great simplifier is a lens, and here arrives Augustin Jean Fresnel, a quiet revolutionary with a talent for asking light to do more with less. Instead of one heavy piece of glass, he stacks thin rings, each cut to bend light just so. The result looks like a crystal beehive or a transparent wedding cake, tall, prismatic, miraculous. A flame that once reached a few miles now speaks across many without demanding a forest per week to keep it eloquent. The lens has personality. Some are little, what keepers call a sixth-order lens, small as a stout lampshade, for river mouths and harbours. Others are grand, first-order giants taller than a person, their brass frames gleaming where hands have loved them with polish. Walk around one and the world turns into ribbons of brightness, each facet a promise pointed somewhere particular. When the keeper polishes the glass until it disappears, they are erasing anything that might make light stumble, letting it glide through, smooth as thought. Now the beam learns to speak in syllables. Ships need not only brightness but meaning, so the light develops a character, steady or flashing every so many seconds, or grouped in twos and threes like footsteps you can count. How to make a light blink on cue before electricity? You move the lens. A clockwork machine waits on a cable, gears in a brass case, turns the giant glass like a music box for photons. Each rotation makes the beam sweep the horizon and return, a patient lighthouse handwriting its name again and again. The keeper winds the mechanism the way you'd wind a long case clock, cranking a winch until the weight climbs, then letting gravity do a graceful job of timekeeping. Some pedestals float the lens on a ring of liquid metal to reduce friction. The great beehive almost dances on its invisible pond, moving with the pleased ease of something finally unburdened. Nightwork becomes choreography. Before dusk, the keeper climbs with a checklist in their head. Wicks, trimmed to a soft oval, no ragged edge to make a wicked little crown of smoke. Oil, topped up, not a gulp more than the lamp will drink, because spills are drama, and drama is the one element this room does not welcome. Chimneys, spotless, glass, every pane wiped until the cloth squeaks, the clockwork wound till the weight rests neat against its stop. Ventilators, set so the draft steadies the flame without trying to steal it. A page in the logbook records it all, weather, times, the small observations that make a craft feel like a conversation. Lens polished to the south, gear took grease well, swallows indignant at daylight rehearsal. After dark, the room changes temperature. You feel the warmth of the lamp at your shins and the faint cool exhale of the vents. The lens throws phantom ladders of light across the walls as it turns, now bright, now quiet, like breath. Through the glass you track ships as if following commas in a sentence you've learned by heart. If the flash is due every 10 seconds, you count with a private metronome, 1, 2, and when the light speaks on time, you feel the satisfaction of a musician landing the beat. You listen for the tick of the escapement, the small dignified governor that keeps time from sprinting. The mechanism's click is steady company, a cat purring in brass. The work matters more than any one keeper because the beam reorders the sea. Routes take their bearings from these signals, insurance rates from these certainties. A captain reads the flashes, there, 2 quick, 1 long, and knows not only where they are, but who they are near, and how to thread the coast's teeth without nicking enamel. Ports publish lists. The characters of lights, their heights above sea level, their ranges in clear weather. Mariners carry those lists like hymnals. Dependable flash is a note in a score everyone has agreed to play. Commerce, for all its appetite, loves rhythm most of all. But precision has a price, and the price is care. Soot is not sentimental. It will coat anything that hesitates. Salt will crust every brass edge within the week if you let it. The lens craves attention the way flour craves water. Keepers become custodians of surfaces. There is a ritual to the cleaning, a holy order to the cloths, dry for a dust, damp for prints, a touch of whiting to coax the last smudge from a prism seam. Each pane is a little door light must not catch on. The brass asks for polish like a vain uncle, flattered, demanding, somehow lovable. At night the keeper moves softly, partnered to glass and flame, quick only where quickness is mercy. Fuels too write their own chore list. Coal's oil is virtuous but thick. It sulks in cold and must be coaxed with warmth before it flows. Kerosene runs brighter and leaner, but insists you understand its moods. Trim too short and you starve it. Too long and it smokes like a gossip. Spare wicks in tins, spare chimneys wrapped in paper, spare everything organised against the hour when a spare is the only difference between a brief interruption and a rumour on the morning's dockside. If the light is a promise, the storeroom is the heartbeat that helps keep it. Weather remains a collaborator and a critic. Clear nights make the job feel like conducting moonlight. Gales turn the lantern room into a drum. Glass booming softly, the metal dome humming at a pitch only the gulls truly appreciate. In fog the lens becomes a courteous ghost, flashes blooming in the mist and dying a few yards out. The keeper keeps the schedule anyway, because character is a moral duty as much as an optical one. Sound will have its hour later. Tonight, light holds the stage even if the audience is only the room. There's humour here, the kind that keeps people level. A keeper may joke that the lens likes compliments, that it shows off when visitors climb the stair, or that the clockwork is a jealous pet, going out of its way to ask for a wind just when you've poured tea. The best jokes are gentle because they have to be. The room prefers calm. This is a workplace where the loudest sound most nights is the beam writing its circle and the keeper's pencil talking to paper. By day, the system doesn't sleep so much as breathe differently. The lamp is quiet. The weight rests. The room loses its secret theatre quality and becomes a workshop again. Repairs happen then, gaskets and hinges, finicky adjustments to the shutter that shapes the flash into its exact syllable. Visitors come when they can, careful with boots and wide-eyed at the sense of height, of a horizon you can measure with your fingertips. A child watches the lens and whispers as if in church. The keeper answers questions about distances and timing in a voice that takes no credit and quietly deserves much. If you compare this age to the bonfire years, the difference is not only brighter beams and longer reach. It is that the light has learned to speak a language everyone can read. It has grammar, steady, occulting, isophase, flashing. It has syntax, every so many seconds, with a pause that means something. It has diction, the clarity of glass cutting haze into obedient slices. The sea is still itself, unkind some days, magnificently indifferent most. But the conversation with shore has become fluent. A vessel can arrive with more confidence than bravado, and confidence is kinder to families and cargo both. Toward dawn, the lens keeps turning, less needed by the minute but reluctant to give up the habit. The keeper watches the sky subtract stars. They can feel in their body the last flash that matters. One more sweep, another, perhaps one final wink for a latecomer slipping past the headland. Then the lamp is lowered to a whisper and pinched to memory. Glass sighs as temperature evens out. The room smells faintly of clean metal and yesterday's flame. In the log goes the verdict. Operated as character. Visibility good to fair, clockwork steady. The keeper wipes a last, invisible fingerprint from a prism because leaving things better than found is part of the oath. Down the stair, the boots count the steps again. The weight rests, the winch waits. In the service room, a pair of wicks are trimmed for tonight. Tools return to their loyal hooks, oil measured out for an evening that looks windy on the horizon. The tower feels serene in daylight, a large instrument at rest, like a piano shut against dust. The work has become almost invisible, which is a way of saying it has succeeded. And if you take your own small torch into a dark room and cup it with your hand so it becomes a narrow beam sweeping a wall, you'll understand the pleasure of a perfect arc repeated on time. Good light has cadence, it returns like breath. In this second chapter, the keepers have given light not just height, but character. Not just distance, but meaning. Night now carries a pulse you can trust, and every few seconds, somewhere on the coast, that promise writes itself across the water. Gentle, exact, and right on cue. Fog arrives the way a quiet blanket is laid over a sleeping room. Not an absence, exactly, but a soft addition. The world wrapped in felt, edges rounded, distances tucked in. The sea goes from speaking in bright sentences to whispering in ellipses. If light is handwriting, fog makes it smear. And so the lighthouse learns a second language. The beam keeps its promise, of course, but sound steps forward to translate. Bells, whistles, trumpets, sirens, each with a measured breath and a purpose, begin to inhabit the coast. You don't just hear them, you wear them. Their notes settle on your ribs and hum there, calm as a purring cat. In some stations, the earliest solution is simple and stubborn. A bell on a frame, struck by hand in foggy spells. A keeper stands under a dripping hood, swinging a timbered clapper, with a rhythm you could set your heartbeat to, 2 strokes, rest, 2 strokes, rest, so that a vessel nosing toward a harbour mouth can count its way in. Later, the bell learns clockwork manners. A weight drops, a train of gears turns, and a hammer kisses bronze at precise intervals, freeing the keeper's arms for other chores while the fog gets on with being atmospheric. Out at sea, boys join the choir, rocking their bells and gongs whenever the swell asks them to sing. Their voices are small but useful, like the polite warning cough of a neighbour who doesn't want to startle you on a staircase. Whistles and horns grow the vocabulary. Compressed air becomes the new fuel for sound. An engine in a house below the lantern thumps like a steady heart, feeding a receiver tank with breath. When the keeper opens a valve, air rushes through a tongue or a reed, and the horn says its syllable, a long, patient note, or a pair of shorter calls, or a pattern that, like the light's character, announces not just I am here, but I am this one. The great diaphone is the glamorous cousin, its double-beat voice rounding the fog with a dignified sound that trembles pleasantly in your bones. On clear days, its house smells of oil and warm metal. On foggy nights, the whole headland wears its song like a shawl. Later, sirens join, hand-cranked at tiny posts, steam-driven at big stations, each tool chosen with the practical modesty of people who care only that a ship hears what it needs to hear. Inside the keeper's dwelling, fog has its domestic consequences. The kitchen is a warm republic with an iron stove, a chipped mug always within reach, and a window so salted by spray that stars appear twice at night, once outside and once dimmer in the glass. On fog days the room is quiet except for the muffled thud of the horn starting up below, the soft shiver of crockery when the tone lands just right. A cat patrols the baseboards with civil authority, whiskers pricked at each new vibration. A child, if there is a child, learns to count not by sheep, but by seconds between blasts and the number of spoonfuls of jam required to bribe a mouth to stay shut during a noon call. Somewhere a loaf decides how it feels about rising, and the diary on the table by the window gathers its neat entries. Fog at 0410, horn engaged at 418. Visibility to garden gate, then theory. Isolation here is not an emptiness so much as a shape the day wears. You get accustomed to distance the way a town person gets accustomed to noise. There is a supply boat whose captain knows the way by heart, though sometimes he has to test it with a pole when kelp crowds the little cove. He brings kerosene, flour, newspaper a week old, and the sort of news that suits a mug. Who mended what, who married whom, how the herring are running, how the minister's hen has made a hobby of outwitting fences. Packages arrive wrapped in brown paper and good intentions. In winter, if ice lays a hard hand on the harbour, a sled takes over the route, runners whispering secrets to snow. The gratitude is practical and specific, a sack of potatoes, a reel of line, a tin of whiting for the lens, a letter that says simply all well. Families make a home of it. Laundry snaps on a line on the rare day that Wynne chooses to be helpful and not interpretive. There's a garden pinned down with stones, the soil improved with seaweed until carrots decide they can be bothered. Chickens negotiate their complaints with gulls. On a still evening, you can hear knives being sharpened from the keeper's kitchen, and from the fishing huts across the bay, a chorus of little tinny sighs that say tomorrow's meals will be tidy. Children learn a curriculum of tides and tasks, arithmetic by measuring oil, handwriting by copying the logbook's tidy times, geography by pointing out headlands and learning their names the way other kids learn streets. When official school is far, lessons arrive in bundles, paper exercises, correspondence graded in a town beyond the salt line. The mail comes late, but not less loved. The house's rooms measure seasons. In spring, windows wage their glinty war against salt. In summer, the lantern room is a gentle kiln and the nights short enough to make you feel almost social. Autumn puts iron back in the gusts and lift in the waves. Winter is a tutor with strong opinions. You learn to plan fuel with the seriousness of a banker, to mind boots and latches, to keep a spare pair of socks in a tin because even a well-aired room can decide to be damp. The stove is an ally. It dries mittens into objects that could stand by themselves and renders soup into comfort with commendable efficiency. A good pot is not only an object but a policy. There is, of course, the weather you do not name loudly. Nights when the sea takes its deep breath and throws it inland. The house shudders. The horn's note swells and thins as wind lays a hand across its mouth. Those are not disasters here. They are simply demanding hours. The keeper's voice stays even, the way a pilot's does on the radio. The room is a raft, and the raft rides out the insistence with neat seams. There is a place for worry, but it is in practical drawers, spare wick, spare gasket, spare cup of tea for someone who's been awake too long. The rule, unwritten but iron, is that voices stay soft and hands keep moving. The morning after arrives, a small miracle that happens so often you're allowed to expect it. Communication steps ashore in bits and wires as the years go on. Where once messages travelled only by boat and rumour, lines arrive. First telegraph in some places, then telephone. A black receiver joins the mantle's companionship of clock and seashell. You can ring the harbour master now and tell him visibility. Ask whether the South Buoy's bell has been complaining as much as you think it has. Find out if the baker's bread shaped up after last week's sulk. With radio, the house learns to listen beyond the horizon. Calls sign on, check weather, drift away again in polite crackles. The lighthouse becomes not just a beacon and a horn, but a small office of information. A place where numbers about barometric pressure and wind direction transform into decisions a captain can trust. Most days it feels like a minor miracle to sit in a kitchen and hear, faint and tidy, a voice from a boat you cannot see saying good morning. Fog signals, like lights, develop personalities and responsibilities. You cannot simply honk and hope. The intervals are standardised, the tones are selected so neighbouring stations will not be mistaken for each other in a midnight soup. A list lives in the drawer with the stamped envelopes, a tidy ledger saying that the point to the north gives a long blast every 45 seconds, and the reef to the east speaks in pairs. A visiting mariner flipping through his well-thumbed book nods to hear the expected voice. That low B-O, that nimble peal, that even open-throated sigh. The coast becomes a choir, and the songs overlap into a map you can read with your ears. Inside, the clockwork that governs sound is as dear to the keeper as the one that turns the lens. A weight must be wound, a governor must be set so the hammer falls when it should and not when it shouldn't. Air compressors want oiling, belts need the attentive calm you give to temperamental friends. There's a small bench with a vice that has known every bolt in the house by first name. The tool drawer clicks shut with the right sort of finality, the kind that makes a person stand a little taller and consider the afternoon almost under control. There are greasy rags that once were shirts and now are wisdom in cotton form. Nothing in this room is a showpiece. Everything is an actor that knows its lines. Visitors are rare enough to feel like holidays and common enough to teach patience. Tourists sometimes climb when weather is kind, their faces opening like flowers at the view, their feet slower on the stair coming down as if the height had rewound their sense of time. A child will point at the horn and ask, very seriously what note it plays. The keeper, not a music teacher but something close, will answer, "The note of coming home." A young couple will hold hands in a place where holding hands goes back 1,000 years. An old mariner will touch the rail as if greeting an old friend and tell a story the house already knows. The keeper smiles a lot on such days. The horn, if it's silent, minds its own dignity and doesn't interject. Community stretches beyond the headland in thin lines of kindness. On a storm day, the lifeboat crew, people of enormous competence and no fuss, will pass the tower on their way to see what the sea thinks it's doing now. The keeper will watch them as you watch a dancer hold a lift, admiring, grateful, aware that this beauty is built on practice. On a clear morning, the postmistress will tuck an extra slice of pie into the parcel marked with the familiar name, because she understands that fog has calories it takes from a person. A fisherman will mend a net on the wall below and wave at the lantern with the easy handshake of neighbours who see each other daily, but have very little to say that a wave cannot cover. And there is the logbook, the common thread through calm and weather. Its pages hold not drama, but consistency. Horn silenced at 9:12, visibilities to distant shore. Family from the red farmhouse visited. Child asked sensible questions. Air receiver drained. Water content excessive. Gull with an opinion on everything. The humour is dry on purpose, the way crackers are. Pleasant with tea, not upsetting to digestion. If something more serious is noted, the phrase here is always spare, it is with respect and an eye toward what needs doing next. The book is less a narrative than a ledger of promises kept and small repairs made to the fabric of ordinary life. When night comes early and stays ambiguous, the fog signals companionship is nearly physical. You sit with it the way you would sit with a friend on a porch swing, saying nothing important and meaning a lot. Its calls pace the room. The cat sleeps and twitches in rhythm. The lamp on the table performs its own small circle of light while the great lamp upstairs teaches the horizon. The keeper counts, not to measure the horn, which is steady as breath, but to keep their mind from running down side paths that lead nowhere useful at 3 a.m. A person can get good at the art of being awake without being anxious. The horn helps. It says, "We are doing what can be done." It says, "Someone is listening." The profession's importance in this chapter of its life, fog and sound and kitchens that smell of soap and biscuits, lies in how it turns a threat into a system. Fog is not vanquished. It is acknowledged and answered. Mariners don't pretend vision, they cultivate hearing. The shore doesn't shrug at weather, it sings back. Insurance, always listening from a desk with sharp pencils, nods toward reduced uncertainty and tidier ledgers. Markets appreciate arrivals that don't depend on the mood of vapour. Families learn to hear the horn in town and feel both a tug of longing and a calm like the tide going slack. The world grows manageable in more kinds of night than one. Toward dawn, fog sometimes lifts all at once, as if it were a sheet whisked away by a conjurer. More often it thins politely, deciding not to be a problem and returning to its hobby of making spiderwebs photogenic. The horn gives its last scheduled call. Silence returns so gently you can hear a kettle make up its mind to boil. The lens upstairs keeps turning until light makes its help redundant, then slows. A great glass beehive settling into daylight tasks. The keeper writes the morning's final line and opens the door to air that smells of weeds and relief. Out on the water, a bellboy continues to tap like a thoughtful spoon, and a fisherman trims his course by a mark he could now see, even without sound. The world resumes its edges. If you close your eyes now, you can still feel the notes in your chest. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. Fog will come again, and the tower, the horn, the kitchen with its chipped mug will be ready. The sea might never be entirely in a mood to listen, but it answers to rhythm as well as to light. That's the secret of this chapter, the night-learned melody. And when the last echo drifts off the headland, the blanket lifts from the room, and you're left with the quiet, which is not empty at all. It's the space that remains after a promise has been kept. Twilight in the lantern room feels different when the light decides for itself. The keeper stands a step back, hands in pockets, and watches the room perform its well-practiced magic without waiting for instructions. A sensor somewhere, a little pupil of glass the size of a thumbnail, watches the sky grow lavender, and then grey, and then that particular hush of blue. When the evening reaches the agreed-upon softness, the lamp obeys a circuit and wakes. No match, no breath held over a wick. Just a click, a hum, the quiet bloom of brightness behind glass. It is the same promise as ever, but the way the promise is kept is changing. This is the chapter where the lighthouse learns to do its work almost alone, and the people who loved it learn to step back without feeling replaced. The first steps toward without me are modest, like any household convenience that turns out to be a hinge. Fuel, once shouldered up the stair in sacks and cans, finds easier forms. Acetylene arrives with its tidy insistence, gas stored in cylinders, piped to a mantle, that glows with a white, efficient steadiness. The trick, as always, is timing, and a Swedish invention called the sun valve makes a little miracle of that. 3 metal rods warm at different rates with daylight and squeeze a valve shut, then relax in evening and open it again. Imagine a tiny doorman with impeccable manners attending to sunrise and sunset. The keeper, who once had to wake and tend by instinct and clock, now finds that the light greets the dusk on its own exactly when the sky seems to take a breath. There's a new job then, watching the watcher, checking the valve's clean lines, the mantle's delicate fabric, the way gas sings through a nozzle with a sound like a kettle thinking. Electricity hums up the stair soon after, sometimes brought by a cable from shore, sometimes born in a small generator house that smells of oil and good intentions. Lamps change again. Filaments glow, then incandescent mantles fed by pressurized vapor whisper with surgical brightness, and later lenses meet electric arcs, and then practical bulbs that last longer than tempers. The clockwork that turned great glass once upon a time still turns, sometimes with a motor that purrs where weights used to groan down a shaft. The lens is the same patient beehive of prisms, the same miracle of thrift, only now its dance partner keeps a steadier tempo and asks fewer night favours of the keeper's back. Meanwhile, invisibility becomes a tool. Radio beacons lean in from the horizon and begin to hum their markers into the sky. A ship with ears for it can listen to a low, steady pulse, take bearings from 2 or 3 such stations, and discover its position without ever seeing a lantern. It's like learning there are street signs for the dark, posted in the air itself. In fog, this is a kindness. In storms, this is a form of knowing that needs neither moon nor memory. Keepers who grew up with soundings and stars learn to read needle swings and faint, polite patterns that arrive as if by thought. The light carries on, and of course it does. You never turn down a good layer of certainty at sea, but the invisible alphabet grows its own loyalty. World events hurry change along, as they often do. War scatters new devices across coasts, radar that reads distance with patience and pulses, reflectors that make a ship's outline more talkative, radio aids that tell the truth even when weather lies. The science that defended harbours becomes the science that shepherds commerce. Lauren nets the ocean with timing, long-range navigation that asks receivers to compare the arrival times of distant radio heartbeats and translate them into a position on a chart. It's like listening to 2 clocks on different mantles and knowing, from the difference in their chimes, which chair you're sitting in. Decker does it with phases, a set of interlocking waves that build a pattern underfoot. The sea, which favoured markers you could point at, grows comfortable with ones you can only trust. The shore answers with a new kind of keeper, a person whose hands are as good with a voltmeter as with a wick trimmer. The service rooms, once smelling mostly of kerosene and polish, acquire the sense of insulation, solder and rubber. Shelves make space for fuses, spare bulbs, seals and O-rings. The logbook learns a second dialect, alongside visibility moderate. Windsoutherly, one finds photocell tested, found responsive, and beacon character maintained. FL 2 10 seconds, monitoring alarm reset. The rhythm of winding and trimming yields to the rhythm of inspecting and verifying. A person who once walked their rounds with a tinder box does so now with a toolbox. Both are rituals, both are care. Even the fog speaks the new language. The old horns, noble with their booming syllables, sometimes yield to electronic voices that shape notes from electricity. There are racons, radar beacons, that do a clever trick. They wait to feel the brush of a ship's radar, and then reply by painting a bright, unmistakable mark on that ship's screen. A mariner who cannot see 40 yards can see a point of honesty appear on a glass circle and know the headland's name without hearing it or sighting it. Boys learn to blink with solar-fed eyes and chirp with chips that know when night begins, and they keep their schedules as if they wore pocket watches of their own. The orchestra of the coast modernises without changing its tune. Stay clear, come home, mind the shallows, welcome. One by one, the cottages near the towers settle into new purposes. Where a family once lived with a cat and a garden pinned down with stones, a maintenance crew visit once a month or once a quarter to wipe salt from panels, check batteries, test alarms. The cupboard with a spare pair of socks gives way to a cabinet with site plans and an antenna inventory. The phone on the mantel is replaced by a little box no bigger than a sandwich that whispers its opinion of voltage back to a control room far away. "I'm fine," it says most days. "I could use a visit," it says now and again. In a city office, a map blinks small watchful lights to show it has heard and understood. Destaffing when it arrives is not a single day but a season. In one station, the last log entry is careful and ordinary, light operating. Clockwork disengaged, motor after sunrise, lens secured, house closed. A key turns. Boots that know every squeak of the stair pause in the doorway and make a quiet calculation about what to take and what to leave. A photograph comes off a nail. A plant in a chipped pot, the stubborn fern that tolerated winters, finds a home with a neighbour down the road. The kettle is rinsed and left upside down, an old courtesy. No one wishes the building anything but goodness. The tumble of quiet that follows is not the neglect. It is a different kind of attention, the sort that visits in scheduled vans and writes its notes on forms tucked in waterproof sleeves. How important was the light before all this? Enough to reroute economies and soften grief. Enough to let insurance tables smile. Enough to knit coastlines to harbours in a choreography you could sail by in weather that would have been pure dare once. The importance keeps its shape even when the work changes. A beam remains a simple, legible form of truth. Electronics fail beautifully most days, and then one day they don't, and on that day the old language, light on a headland, a tower speaking the horizon, still makes sense to a human eye. Redundancy is not romance, it's just good manners in a complicated world. And the romance isn't entirely lost. Many towers become museums, keepers' houses become inns, and glass rooms learn to host whispered wedding vows under a ceiling of careful prisms. Heritage groups polish brass until memory smiles in it. Volunteers carry buckets and brushes and arguments about the correct shade of paint. A schoolchild reads about Fresnel and finds herself staring at a soap bubble in different light, wondering how many angles a glow can wear. A retired keeper tells a story about the night the fog was so thick the horns seemed to push back, and the new devices in the exhibit case look both marvellous and young. The sea outside goes on with its old business. Tugboats drawing punctuation across the bay, gulls striking their opinions against the air. A bell bowie tapping the time for no one and everyone. Modern aids to navigation grow smaller and steadier. LEDs sip rather than drink. Solar panels tilt like dutiful sunflowers and keep their batteries content. AIS beacons add polite radio introductions to buoys and lights, whispering their names and positions to passing ships so that a chart plotter can nod and say yes, that one. The International Association of the Marine Aids to Navigation agrees on symbols and colours, and the world that once had a patchwork of habits learns, kindly, slowly, to present a more uniform face to mariners who do not carry a coastline's whole biography in their heads. It is all a continuation of one thought. Make the edge of the sea legible by day and by night, by light and by sound and by signal too small to frame and hang. There are places, though, where automation never meant indifference. A gale will find any weakness that hasn't had a hand laid on it recently. Salt still has ambition. Hinges will go on wanting oil. A helicopter sets down on a pad near a lonely rock, 2 technicians fasten their hats against the wind, and the old practical respect returns as they step into a lantern room that has watched 100 dawns and can still show you, if you look close, where a keeper once set a mug. They walk the stair and count the steps without counting. They fix what needs fixing. They do not hurry any more than the old keepers did, because haste is a kind of disrespect in houses like this. As they lift off again, the light turns of its own will toward a grey afternoon, and no one finds that less meaningful because the start came from a sensor rather than a match. Out to sea, navigation leans into satellites and screens, GPS and then its companions, lace timing around the world with an accuracy that would make a clock jealous. A boat appears as a precise dot on an electronic chart that can show rocks and wrecks, and even the rumour of a current. The power in that is plain and daily. A captain can thread a track into a harbour the way a needle finds the same bead Sunday after Sunday. But ask any mariner with a few winters in their bones, and they'll tell you they still look up. If clouds behave strangely, if the radio grows coy, if the screen does a little midnight theatre, they want a beam out at there, sweeping, saying the oldest words the coast knows how to say. The end of lighthouse keeping as a common profession does not erase the people who did it. Many became maintainers and station tenders. Some became park guides whose hands still know the weight of a lens panel, and who can show you the scratch where a storm argued with a hinge in 1956. Some moved farther inland, and whenever a storm comes, they stand at a window and feel a tickle of old muscle memory running down their forearms to their palms. They remember the taste of salt on a mug's rim. They remember the night's graduated silence, the way wave, wind, mechanism and heartbeat tune themselves to each other if you sit still and let them. They keep a lamp at home and polish it without quite noticing. If you visit at dusk now, choose any headland that has loved ships for 100 years, you may see a light settle into duty as smoothly as a cat settling into a nap. There's no bustle, the door is locked, the cottage is quiet. The garden, if it's still there, has turned to a patch of rough grass with stubborn thyme and one stone that used to prop a gate. The lantern glows on cue, the lens turns. Somewhere inland a screen marks that all is well. A buoy nods in time, a racon is ready to draw a friendly mark on any radar that asks. The whole place is as calm as an exhale. It isn't sad, it's just different. The promise doesn't need a witness to be a promise. And yet, on certain evenings, memory strolls with the beam. You can almost hear the soft conversation of the old clockwork, the shy song of kerosene, the padded footfall of a keeper who knows how to move around glass without making it anxious. You can smell brass that like to be flattered. You can imagine a child at a window counting flashes the way other children count sheep, letting the rhythm fold them down into sleep. The modern light writes the same circles, and circles are good at carrying history without dropping it. The profession's end is therefore not an ending so much as a handoff. Tools learn to take over the part of the job that could be taught to machines. Timing, brightness, turning, listening, talking. What could not be mechanized, care, stewardship, the intuitive way a person watches weather with their whole body, didn't vanish. It moved. It lives in the technicians who visit. It lives in volunteers who sweep sand from thresholds before opening hours. It lives in mariners who look up for one reassuring blink on filthy nights because reassurance is a human appetite with no replacement. It lives in the beam itself, which goes on saying what it has always said, whether or not a human hand launched the first syllable. If you think back to the beginning, the bonfires and baskets of coals, the watchful faces on cold hills, you can feel the through line like a rope under your palm. The materials have changed their costumes, the gestures have become lighter, but the heartbeat of the work hasn't altered since someone first lifted a flame above a dark shore and asked it to keep its word. People wanted to go, and people wanted to come home. The distance between those wants was night, and night answered to light. Now, as evening leans in, the tower wakes on its own and starts its patient handwriting across the water. A ship beyond the headland reads the strokes on a screen, and with its eyes, because both are useful. Inland, far beyond sound, someone who used to wind a weight checks a small panel that shows a satisfied green. On the old kitchen shelf in a museum now sits a chipped mug and a ledger open to a neat line about weather 40 years ago. The cat, somewhere in the story that refuses to be past tense, walks a familiar path along a sill worn to velvet by paws. The sea keeps its counsel. The light keeps its promise. If you cup your phone in your palm tonight and let its beams sweep the wall once, just once, you'll know the feeling, the old comfort riding in a new vessel. The technology changed, the promise didn't. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a quiet close. The story lingers, like the last glow of candlelight, as you drift further into rest. If these gentle wanderings bring you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so that whenever you wish, you may return and we can travel together once more. For now, dear listener, may your dreams be kind, and your night be restful. Until next time.